Good afternoon. I'm Bob Patillo with the Alamogordo Chamber of Commerce with another on the menu for you today. I believe this is number 7. It's Thursday, April the 30th, 2020. And our special guest today is Laurel Fisher. I'm going to share with you an introduction. Laurel says that sales is often considered a dirty word, but if you look at it in terms of problem solving, and then treating your customers the way you would like to be treated, it can be a very rewarding part of the job. Laurel Fisher started in sales in the late 90s, trying to ensure that the small avionics business she managed could make payroll and could pay for their COD UPS orders. Over the years, she's been lucky enough to work in sales and sales training in various Fortune 500 companies, such as Merck, Lincare, and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. In today's presentation, Laurel offers tips to improve your customer-focused sales skills when interacting with new prospects and current customers. You will today receive tools that, if practiced, will allow you to form new habits for long-term sales success. Gaining new clients and increasing your repeat business are the best ways to grow revenue. Laurel's presentation today is meant to help you do just that. I'd like to introduce Laurel Fisher with Power Up Your Pitch. Hello, Laurel. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Laurel, before we start, would you give everybody a little bit of a bio and how you ended up in Alamogordo?
Sure. Well, my background is actually healthcare. So I have a nursing degree. And when I moved to Montana from Ohio in the very early 90s, I got a temporary job with an aviation company called Neptune Aviation. And that is actually the first time I'd ever heard of Alamogordo, New Mexico. I was working at their base in Missoula, Montana, but that's when I first learned about this town. And because of some promotions through that company and what I really loved doing was more business oriented, I went on to get my MBA at University of Wyoming and then worked in aviation for a number of years and then moved back over to healthcare, but is in the sales and the marketing and business admin side of it. And then my husband retired a few years ago and he's from this area as well. So we came back down here to be somewhere that was warmer more of the year than Wyoming. And that's what brought us to Alamogordo.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And what would you like to share with us today? Give us some tips to help us with our business, please.
Yes. Well, like I put in the intro that Bob read, is that sales, it does connotate, the used car salesman or something like that. And even when I traveled, when I worked for Merck, I would sometimes just tell people who sat next to me on the airplane, what do you do? Oh, I work in business. Or I would just try not to say sales because you almost feel like it has that negative connotation. But I really enjoy it because there's a problem-solving aspect to it. And because if you go about it in such a way as that you are trying to solve a problem or assist your client or customer to get what they need, then it is a very honorable profession. And I'm kind of focused a little bit today on this Power Up Your Pitch, really thinking about the small business people, because most small business people will say, well, I don't really like the sales side of the business. But right now, today's April 30th, and the economy is uncertain right now. The sales side and learning really good customer-focused techniques is going to help those small businesses to persevere over the next few months. I feel it's going to help these businesses stand out from their competition. And so I'm going to go through a little bit, kind of 3 steps, kind of that promotional, how do you really promote what you do so that people get to the point where they say to you, tell me more about your product or your service. If anybody watched the little promo video I made yesterday for this on the menu, I showed a couple products that I was going to talk about and explain why they go along with sales. So the first one is this little gem right here. And it does this. The batteries aren't in it, but it's an atomic lantern. I was camping, and camping in our camper, we can pick up over-the-air channels, and so you get a lot of Walker Texas Ranger reruns interspersed with infomercial type commercials. And while I was watching a commercial, they said, if you want a tough, powerful light, then you need the atomic lantern. And at that point, we were outside cooking our steaks on the grill in the dark with a flashlight in our hand. And this atomic lantern commercial came up where it has magnets that would stick on the metal ramada and light up my grill. It was exactly what I needed. They knew what my problem was, and this lantern solved my problem. So one tip I'm going to give you is to, in your free time, when you're looking at YouTube, look at some of those infomercials on YouTube, because they are masters of putting out a problem that a lot of people have, showing you how their product solves that problem, and then getting you to buy it. Now, you don't want to sound like an infomercial, but it just shows you the process that you want to think through. So the first tip I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share my screen so you don't always have to look at me. And that is the lead with you versus I. If I go back to the atomic lantern, their little promo was, if you want a tough, powerful lantern, you need the atomic lantern. It wasn't telling me what the company needed. Of course, they needed me to buy it. It was putting me as the person in charge. So a good promo or a pitch is a compelling introduction that solicits the other side to say, tell me more. And doing the you versus I test will help with that. This little quote here, focusing first on the needs of your clients or customers will strengthen your business in the long term. Learn how to utilize this mindset when it comes to sales. That's the text that I wrote when I shared the event for today's On the Menu. If you notice, I didn't put, I am going to teach you this. I am going to show you those techniques. Again, I made it you focused. When you're writing up promos, count the number of times it says you versus the number of times it says I. An example of being more I focused is, I hear this a lot in direct sales. I hear people say or put out on social media, I'm only $200 short of reaching my goal. And sure, they do get sales that way. Someone will say, oh, okay, I'll buy some hand lotion from this person or a candle or whatever it is they're selling. But they're not buying it because they really need it. They're saying, oh, I like this person, I'm going to buy from them. And that can generate short-term sales, but I want businesses out there to think of the long-term sales. So the first part of focusing on the you versus I is for you to think about, what do you do extremely differently than your competition? You know, it could be something as simple as you have extended hours. Okay, a veterinarian that is open on the weekend, you know, there might be only one in a certain town, or maybe there's none, and you want to differentiate yourself. Be the veterinarian that's open on the weekend. You know, when I talk about sales coaching, I'll say often, do you want to increase the revenue you get from repeat customers and referrals? Okay, you figure out how you differentiate it. And I'm going to go through these little kind of formulas for this simple promo, and then I will give you ideas on how do you figure out how you're extremely different from your competition. And then also the second one, what problem or need does your product or service solve or fill? Going back to the atomic lantern, I wanted a tough lantern that I could use when I was camping. So it's hands-free and it would light up the grill on the picnic table when I was outside in the dark making hamburgers or hot dogs or steaks. That was my problem. The atomic lantern filled that need. And then you kind of put it together. You know, how does the uniqueness of what you offer solve your customer's problem? Okay, a tough lantern that's very bright. How does that solve someone's problem? You put it together. Looking at the example of when I'm promoting my sales trainings, this sales training is based on your team developing new habits that give them the tools to get clients to sell the product to themselves. That might be part of the pitch. Okay. And again, the example are the atomic lantern. My coaching example could be one of them. It might be, again, the veterinarian. Do you work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you don't out of town and you're only here on the weekends? You can only take your dog to the vet to get his vaccinations on the weekends. We're open Saturdays and Sundays. Problem, solution. All right, so how do you make this formula work for you? This is what's really important for small businesses. This is where you have to do more than just listen to these, 40 minutes or so of me giving you some examples and helping illustrate this formula. Couple ways to do it. Brainstorm. Often I will give people a worksheet that just listed those questions I went over, and I tell them to sit down and free write or type, whatever they do best when they're just kind of brain dumping, and write out what makes you extremely different. How are you unique? What problems do you solve? What are the needs of your customers? Just write whatever you think for 30 or 40 minutes. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. It doesn't have to be put together in such a way that it makes sense. I just want people thinking about their own, how they would explain what they do in their own words. Because out of a page or two, usually you can find these little pieces that are very compelling and that will, again, get your customers or your prospects to say, tell me more. Another idea when doing this, and I'll bring it up later, for small businesses is to get with a few other small business owners, do this activity and trade your brainstorming and ask those other people what they think. Because working with other small businesses is very helpful, especially, again, you might not work with businesses that are in your industry, but look outside your industry so you can figure out how to make what you're doing compelling and get some outside advice. And then ask your customers. Ask your customers why they use you, because sometimes their answers are different than you would think. And then also, this is one of my favorite questions to ask. What was the worst experience you've had buying? And you can ask this of your customers, maybe the ones you know really well, or ask it of your circle of friends, family, fellow business owners. Ask about your industry and their worst experiences with people within that industry. Because people are always quick to talk about their bad experiences. They remember them more. And what it gives you is it gives you a formula to do the opposite. Okay, if this is what people don't like, how am I different? Or if I if I'm not, how do I become different? So what was the worst experience you've had buying, you know, a light fixture, buying a car, buying a bottle of water? Okay, maybe not a bottle of water, but maybe buying furniture, buying anything, or finding a doctor. What's the worst experience you've had finding a doctor? Because again, that can differentiate physician practices. Any business can use this. Okay, now where do you use this? You use this, you can use this in your promotions. Use it when you're making social media ads. Use it when you're making flyers. It's those little quick 2 or 3 sentences that you put out there that make people click on that button that you have on your social media or on your website. You can also use this a little bit when you introduce yourself to other people. But actually, the next point I'm going to make is a little even better for when you're introducing yourself to other people, because Bob's a physical therapist. He just says, "Hi, I'm Bob Patillo. I'm a physical therapist." Okay, but there are a lot of physical therapists around. So what makes Bob different? So the next point, number 2, is facts tell and stories sell. And I bring this up because there's a couple of things you can do. Facts, again, are just numbers. They're boring. Just saying I'm an accountant or I'm a physical therapist, it doesn't really get to the meat of what you do. But stories or little interesting facts or statistics stick in people's minds. An interesting statistic that someone mentioned when they introduced themselves at a kind of a networking lunch I was at a number of years ago, it was Legacy Pecans from Las Cruces. And she said, "Did you know that pecans are the #1 agricultural export of New Mexico?" And I didn't. I, of course, thought like green chilies or something was the #1 agricultural export of New Mexico. And so that is always stuck in my head. And so if someone asked me, where can you buy local New Mexico grown pecans? The first name that comes to my head is Legacy Pecans, because I still remember her saying that. The other one is demonstration, when you talk about stories and how do you sell. So demonstrating something sticks in your mind and makes you want to buy something. I showed this little gadget on my promo video as well. And it's an apple slicer and core. Cores the apple and it slices it up. Now, I love to cook, but I'm not a big fan of tons of kitchen gadgets because I think they just clutter up all my cabinets and drawers. My mom, on the other hand, is a fan of all sorts of gadgets. And she had one of these. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try it. It's sitting there. We have an apple. And so I tried it. And by using it and having sort of a demo of it, because I tried it before I bought it, I was sold on it. And I love this. And I buy more apples just because I have this little device. And I make more things with apples because of this little device. So how do you demo a product? How do you demo your services? And this goes back to your brainstorming, goes back with maybe working with some other fellow small businesses to think about, how can I show people what my product does? It also goes back again to the first point, the infomercials. Infomercials are infamous for showing people what that product does. YouTube some infomercials. It's all about demonstrating how this pan can cook up the stickiest, grimiest food, and literally you can wipe it away with a paper towel and it's clean. It's that demonstration. So facts tell and stories sell. Okay. Lastly, you've done this. You had your little promo, you had information on social media, or you told people a little 1-minute blurb about what you were talking about, and they came up to you later and said, tell me more about your product. How does this work? This is so important because some people are so worried about that first introductory part about how do I get customers into my store or get them to call me or hit that button on my website, that then when somebody asks, I'm interested in what you have to offer. How can I buy this? Or how can you help me? That it's a deer in the headlights look. They don't know where to go to the next step. When people ask that, there's a couple ways that I normally see people go. I mentioned being in sales training. And in sales training, usually at large companies, you are inundated and your head is filled with a ton of knowledge and facts. So as soon as people say, tell me more, it all just comes flowing out of you. So the last item I showed on my video the other day was a roll of paper towels. And I said, I'm going to tell you why you don't want to have to use paper towels when you're talking with your customers. Because in the sales world, we say, don't show up and throw up. And we mean that not in a gross sense, but in the sense that you don't want to have that verbal vomit of all the information that you know about your product or your service just start coming out of your mouth. The technique to do this is to ask questions. This is the best sales technique there is. Keeping your mouth shut except to ask a few questions here and there and letting your customer tell you what they need, that will either sell them or it may show them that they need a different product, but it still is what you need to find the customers that will come back over and over again and also refer to you. Because maybe the product's not for them, but if they had that good experience, they're more likely to make the referral. If the product is for them and they sell themselves on it, they're probably going to come back again and again for your product. All right, so sales questions. This is the meat of it. And right now, some businesses are very slow. I talked to a friend of mine in Wyoming, and she, what they're doing is really slow right now, or slower than normal. And so they're doing a ton of this with their sales team, and it's role playing. A lot of people will roll their eyes when you say role playing, but it is really the most effective way to get good at not throwing up verbally on your customers, but asking questions. I'm going to give another sort of example of how what I mean by this practice and role play. And this comes from my husband's career as a pilot. He flew for 25 years, most of it in the Mountain West, so Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nebraska, and so lots of really bad winter weather. And what he would always tell newer pilots to do is when the weather's good, ask for the hardest approaches to land in an airport. Because when you're practicing when the weather's good, or in the terms of sales, when you're practicing with just your coworkers and you can mess up, it starts to build your confidence. It also becomes second nature. So my husband would always tell new pilots to practice these hard approaches when the weather was good, because when the weather is really bad, when the winds are gusting 70, 80 miles per hour, the runway's slick, it's a blizzard, and he feels comfortable with the approach, he can deal with the other problems that he's dealing with a lot easier. And the same goes for sales. When I worked for large companies, we had meetings pretty regularly, at least twice a year, probably three to four times a year, and did a lot of role playing. So then when you went in front of your bigger customers, you were a lot more relaxed, and you didn't, because nerves make you verbally vomit. Hopefully they don't make you really vomit, because then it is bad and you need these paper towels. But nerves make you verbally vomit. And by practicing asking the questions, it's a little easier. So I've got a few questions. We've got some time here. So I have a couple that I've put together just to give people examples. So as you're brainstorming on your own, you can think about, how do I come up with really good questions that help me understand and help me find out exactly what my customers need. So I've been doing a little car searching because I'm looking at buying a new car. So that's been in my head a lot. So I made some questions up for a car salesman. So one of them is, what will you be using this car for? Okay, because the answers are different. Some people need it for business. Some people need it because they've got to haul their kids around to soccer practice and ballet and gymnastics. Somebody might need it because they need a truck. They're on a ranch. Well, that's a different type of use of a vehicle than driving it around on a paved road. How many miles a year are you going to put on this car? That's an important question. Another good question, and you can customize this for almost anything. You just have to insert your product or service. What are the top 3 features that you're looking for? Or what are the 3 features that are your favorites on your current vehicle? Or what are the 3 things you like about the house that you just sold? What are the 3 things you like about the doctor from the place you just moved to? Have people think about these things. And maybe ask them, what are features or services that you've purchased in the past that you've never used? That's a good one for if you're a service-based industry. You think about insurance and all the different riders you can get on something. What are the ones that you were sure you wanted and then you've never used, that you thought, I have to have this, but you didn't use it? Service businesses, you figure out, what is it, ask your clients, what do you struggle with on a daily basis? What is the biggest time waster that you have? Because maybe that's the service that you can provide that takes that wasted time away from somebody else. For sales, I ask often, what motivates your sales team? When are they the most motivated? What has been your best motivator for, getting your sales team to really grow the business the way you want it, to increase those repeat customers and to get more referrals? How do you track referrals and how do you track repeat customers? These are just examples. But brainstorming is really key to effective sales. Small businesses, again, business people don't want to do sales. But with times when we're lean and we're needing to cut costs, the business owner is going to be the best salesperson because they know the business better than anybody else. So 3 things, kind of review the 3 things I went over: the you versus I, facts tell and stories sell, and then don't throw up on your customers. Number 1, the you versus I. Definitely brainstorm. Brainstorm on paper and brainstorm with maybe your group of mentors and fellow business people about what makes you unique, what's different about what you offer, and what are the real problems that your product or service sells or the need they fill. Okay, because some things don't solve necessarily a problem, such as jewelry. Doesn't solve a problem, but it fills a need. It makes women feel pretty. So what are those? What makes you different? What problem does your product or service solve, and what need does it fill? Brainstorm those. Facts tell and stories sell. Stories are huge. If you're not a natural storyteller, my suggestion is every night when you're the end of your day, think back on your day and think back about what happened. Who did you interact with? What customers did you interact with? And figure out stories on how you were able to show that your product filled this need, that you helped this person find the home they needed or the car that they really wanted to buy in the price that they could afford. Find some fun facts about whatever it is that your industry is so that you stay top of mind and people remember you. And figure out how you demonstrate or show people, give people a little taste of what you do. And then finally, number 3, don't throw up on your customers. So role play. Role play. If you have the time, do it. And even when you're busy, the most successful sales teams will set aside time, whether it's weekly or monthly, to role play so that they're really comfortable about not just spilling out facts, but asking questions and sitting back and listening to what people have to say so that you can find the product that you have that fits the needs of your customers. And with that, I'm finished with with my verbal vomiting of information. And I can take questions, or even if somebody has a little a pitch that they want to throw out there, I can give them an evaluation.
If anybody has any questions, you can text them to me at 575-430-0548 or on the chat function of Zoom on this conference. So, Laurel, I have some questions for you. What made you decide to get out of the healthcare industry after going to nursing school?
You know, I realized that I like science, like I love science, but I wasn't much of a patient care person. It wasn't my favorite thing to do day in and day out. I've done it with family members, and that's fine, but I think it was not, it wasn't all for me, but I love the science end of it.
What did you learn from nursing that helped you in sales?
I think it is part of why I don't love the patient care day-to-day part of nursing, but I do care about people, and I want people to be treated the way that I would like to be treated if I were a patient, and the same way in sales. I had somebody tell me the other day, "Oh, thank you so much for all your help with this. You know, you guys are so great." And I replied back, "You're welcome, but we just try to treat people the way we ourselves want to be treated."
Okay. Laurel, how much of a role do you think confidence plays in being a good salesperson?
Obviously, it does play a big role, but it's how probably you define confidence. I think confidence in the knowledge of your product is huge. If people don't know what they're selling, they tend to want to sound confident, and I've had this happen to me. They will answer your question, but then later, and there's a great book by Daniel Pink called To Sell is Human, I think. I'm drawing a blank. I have it here on my shelf, but To Sell is Human. But it talks about the fact now with all the technology and information out there, you can't just sit there and say, "Oh yeah, my product does this and this does this," because you can look it up online and find out that no, that's not true. It doesn't actually, this stove does not come with the griddle. that sits on it to make pancakes. It says it right here on the website. So I think you need to be confident in your knowledge. And that's where, with training at any size business, people need to really understand the product or service they're selling, because then they're not afraid to ask their customers the questions about what is it that you're looking for? What features do you really want? Mm-hmm. Because they have those answers and they're able to answer the right question. So it's confidence in what you know, not so much in not being scared to go in. And I think people will get that. They think you have to not be scared to be in sales. But my husband always said he loves flying because there's that thrill, because it's a little bit, there's danger in there. But that's sort of what I get out of sales, is that you don't know if someone's going to buy your product or not, or just slam the door in your face.
Well, that's true. So I know that with you being involved in sales training, you've been around very successful salesmen, saleswomen before. Tell me some of the common characteristics you see in those people.
I definitely follow up is huge. The salespeople who will follow up on something and who understand the importance of follow up, and that actually not having all the answers is a good thing, because it will show, again, going back to demonstrating, it shows your customers that, one, you're honest, and two, when you say you're going to get them an answer and you follow up and get them the answer, you're following through on what you promised.
Okay. And how about unsuccessful people in sales? What kind of characteristics do you see with them?
It goes back to what I started this presentation out with, was wanting to give people the tools for long-term success. It's the salespeople who were just focused very short term, just to the end of this month, just to the end of this quarter, because they will sell things. And I've been asked in my career to sell things that I knew we actually couldn't sell. It would get them to call and make a referral, but we actually couldn't do that through the guidelines. You know, I've worked in very regulated industries most of my life, healthcare, aviation. So I'm used to lots of rules and things to jump through. And I've been asked to sell products that I really couldn't sell. And so that's almost dishonest. So that usually does, in the long term, make people distrust that particular person, and then sometimes that particular company or industry as well. And so that's that short-sightedness is probably the worst characteristic. You really have to look at it long term.
Okay. Tell me, as a trainer of salesmen, saleswomen, tell me about some great customer service or sales people that you've come across that have been trying to sell you something.
I think one of the best ones was a firm trying to sell some publishing, and we were on a conference call with them, and they were the best questioners I had ever heard, because they did not at all there was an agenda about what they were going to go through about their product and how it would help this organization. But they just started by asking a question and letting the other participants answer. Us as the prospects answer these questions. And they kept going through that. And by the end, because they really asked questions that made us as prospects think, we were very sold on the knowledge they had to produce the publication that they were saying they could do.
Do you think customers are willing to pay a little more for a product if the salesperson is really very good at what they do?
Yeah. And actually research will support that. It's about like a third, a third, a third. There's a third of a customer base that they're purely price driven. I mean, that's all. They will always go for the lowest price. But then there's a third who will always go with the higher level of service. You know, they want the red carpet treatment, the 5-star service. Mm-hmm. And then there's the third that are on the fence. It depends. You know, if everybody's the same in their view, yep, they're going with price. But if they see someone who maybe because of the service or because that particular salesperson was extra helpful, they'll pay a higher amount because of that.
So you told us about one of your best experiences. Now tell me a couple of really bad ones that you've had.
Yeah. Okay, well, I had a few, but one of them goes back to not knowing the product. And this goes to when we were having our house built, you know, we got to pick out what appliances that we could put in our house. And I love to cook, and I've got the nicest kitchen I've ever had, everything, just beautiful to work in. And so we went to Las Cruces because they have that store that has all the kitchen stuff. You know, it's all they have a whole Frigidaire area, the Thermidor, like these little kitchens set up so you can like be in the kitchen and see all the ranges, the dishwashers, the refrigerators. It's huge. Like it's like an amusement park for people who like appliances. And I wanted a gas range. That was a requirement. But I saw a lot of them came with these griddles to go on the 5th burner in the middle, so you could make pancakes and stuff on it. Mm-hmm. And so I asked the salesman, does this particular model come with the griddle? And he said, oh yeah, it does. It does. And so I said, okay. So we hadn't made any decisions. Plus the home builder buys it all. You just tell them what you want. So I went home and got online and looked up that particular brand and model of range. And it said it did not come with the griddle. And it's not like this was a deal breaker, whether it came with it or not, because they're like $120. I could buy one. But the fact that he said it did and it didn't really made me angry.
So would you buy from that person again?
No. And I wouldn't refer people to him either. Yeah. And I would also tell people the bad story of why.
So if a young person, let's say in their early 20s, wanted to go into a career of sales, tell me a few things that you advise them to do and not to do as far as their career development.
Number one, I would really recommend they find a mentor. And by that, asking people around them, who do you know in sales that is very trustworthy? Or to go find somebody in the industry that they're in. I mean, you think about insurance or realty or car sales, find someone who's been doing it a long time. Because if they were able to do it a long time, then they're probably trustworthy, and ask to, sit down with them and find out what it is they recommend.
Okay. How about books? You mentioned a book earlier, but can you tell me a couple of different books that would benefit people that wanted to have a career in sales?
Yeah. It's Daniel Pink's To Sell Is Human is really good. I love that book because it tells you that everything is about sales. So it helps you kind of get that sales is a dirty word connotation, off the table. And then I'm reading Leaders Eat Last, and sales is very much that way. In some situations, you do everything for the customer. I did a ton of outside sales, and I literally did often eat last, eat cold food in the car, walking out to the car from an office and going to the parking lot. But you have to put yourself in that situation that sales is not a 9-to-5 job. usually, because there's follow-up at all hours, there's research, and there's also a lot of training, and continuous training is really important, and looking online for not only books, but also sales trainings and videos and ways to make sure you're practicing.
Okay. Somebody just sent a question to me, and it says, what lifestyle habits do you think a person has to develop to become a successful sales and business person?
I think it goes along with lines with your last question about books and learning. You have to be open to constantly learning new techniques for sales, right. Learning from others around you, and learning from people at all levels, people above you, people below you, people on either side of you, new salespeople, because they will come in and have great techniques, and listening to them will change your mind. Also, listening to them is great because technology changes. So how do you change sales techniques with technology, with social media? Those definitely learning, and setting that time aside to always learn not only how to do the craft of sales or be in business, but learn about what it is, learn your product, constantly stay up to date with what your product or service is.
If you were starting your career over, what things would you do differently? If you were 20 years old?
Goodness. "20 years old, what would I do differently?" Mm-hmm. This feels like a table topic. I think the main thing I would do differently myself is that I would not go to college right after high school.
Why?
I would have taken time to work for a couple years. I mean, and I would suggest, if I had kids, I would tell them, you can do this, but you're on your own. You got to pay for it yourself, because there's a lot of lessons learned there. But I would do that to really find what I love to do. Sometimes depending on the person, and everybody's different. When I was in high school, I felt like I wasn't 100% sure, because my dad worked for the government and it was like super secret clearance. So no idea what he did. If your dad's a doctor and you know what he does and you want to be a doctor, then you just go right through college and medical school and become a doctor. But if you're not really sure and you haven't maybe seen all there is to offer, I would work for a few years and then go back and spend money on training for exactly what I wanted to do.
How important, if you're in sales, is the way you dress when you make a presentation?
I think it's very important. Now, that doesn't mean that when you make a presentation, it should always be in a suit and tie or full business attire. You have to look to your industry and look to your clients. If you are selling automotive parts and you go out to automotive shops to sell them maybe tools or parts or things like that, you're not going to wear a suit and tie, because they're not going to take you seriously. You know about how to use a wrench and air tools, and you're wearing this suit and tie. You want to be able to have clothes on, but you want to be clean, look tidy, and be able to, again, go to that demonstration. You're going to demonstrate them, so you're not going to be wearing a suit and a tie that literally could get stuck in a tool and choke you. If you are selling, and I did a lot of medical sales, I'm not going to wear jeans and a sweatshirt. I'm going to look very nice and make it appropriate to where you're at. In Wyoming, a nice sweater and blouse and skirt or slacks is very appropriate. in Chicago, Illinois, if I'm going into a physician's office, I will have on an actual business suit. So you do have to gauge, make it appropriate, make it business appropriate to the type of business you're selling to.
Laurel, I noticed that you are a very competent and confident speaker. Can you tell me some help that you've had to help you get in that position?
Yes. Actually, some of it came from a lot of the sales training, of course, that I'd done that was provided for me by the businesses that I'd worked for. But when I thought about going out and doing freelance work, I read a book by Alan Weiss, and he's a very successful business consultant, huge contracts with large Fortune 500 companies. And one of his top suggestions was join a Toastmasters club.
Okay.
And I looked online. I was living in Wyoming at the time, and we had 3 clubs. And the only one that fit my schedule was the one that met every Monday morning at 6:40 a.m. And I started doing that in 2013. And definitely that has helped me refine my skills as a speaker, my confidence as a speaker, and some of the little habits that people do every single day. Toastmasters helps individuals overcome those, because a lot of times it's how you present yourself, whether it's how you look or how you sound, and that makes a difference in sales and in business.
There are a lot of people, Laurel, that are afraid to speak in public or even in front of a small group. In the Toastmasters, how do they help you with that? I'm assuming they do it in a positive way.
Yeah, Toastmasters is very positive. When you get up to speak, you have, there's always a little bit of evaluation involved, some a little more formal, some just a couple of sentences that people write. But part of what Toastmasters does is it helps you also become an evaluator, because you don't just want to give harsh evaluations. That's why my husband hates to public speak, because he took a communications class in college and he was beaten down by the professor, and now he won't do it anymore. But at Toastmasters, they really do emphasize, this is what you do well. We kind of call it the sandwich technique. This is what you did well. This is what I really liked. I would love for you to do this next time, an area of an improvement. And then again, closing the sandwich with, but I loved how you did this.
Is it difficult to be good in sales if you can't be a good verbal communicator?
Yeah, I think it's really hard if you can't be a good verbal communicator, even with all the technology, because Brittany's on this call and she's our guru of social media and social media marketing, and videos are huge in social media. So if you have to make a video, you have to speak, and not all videos can be edited. Some are live, and you need to make sure that what you're saying makes sense from the start to the finish.
How long did it take you once you started your training to become at ease with talking to a group of people, doing some public speaking?
You know, it all depends on what I'm speaking on. If I know the subject, I'm fairly at ease. Okay. If it's something that I am not as knowledgeable about, or I feel that I'm presenting in front of a whole new group, especially in sales, if you're presenting in front of this potentially huge customer, it's again the practice that makes it so much easier. When I'm practiced and I know exactly how I'm going to open it, what questions I'm going to ask, then I'm very confident. But if I don't practice, I'm not so confident, and also probably not so successful.
Okay. Laurel, it's 1:00. We're going to need to wrap things up today. I want to thank you so much, you and your husband, for being in Alamogordo and bringing your skills and your enthusiasm to our community. And do you have any last words to say before we wrap this up?
No, I just encourage people to use these tips, really practice, take this time to refine what you're doing, be customer focused, because I want to see especially our small businesses here, get through everything that's going on and persevere and succeed.
Okay, very good. Laurel Fisher, thank you so much. We'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, bye-bye.